Of the Republic of Turkey, Mr. Recep Tayyip Erdogan, and Ms. Emine Erdogan have just entered our conference room. Welcome.
Dear guests, my speech will be in Turkish. You may be able to follow us on your headphones. Değerli konuklar,
distinguished guests, for the last 2 days we have gathered in this room as well as some other rooms for closed and open sessions. We have listened to many people, we have listened to many panelists. Let's have a reminder of the last 2 days and then we'll proceed with the highlight of the day.
It is a great pleasure for me to welcome you all here on behalf of TRT World to this, the second annual TRT World Forum. But it is a critical and very timely discussion indeed. I think it's fair to say that the world has always been fragmented.
The world order is increasingly chaotic, where power relations are less clear, universal values are being eroded, and the rule of law is being undermined.
Terrorism, irregular migration, humanitarian crisis, poverty, and xenophobia and hatred are on the rise, and inequalities are everywhere.
If you sacrifice justice for peace, you end up losing both. I hope it also becomes imperative in lots of ways for these countries to work cooperatively, then in competition.
When you have the youth and the wisdom side by side, that's the only way you can transform to the world. That is what Turkey is doing now. That is what TRT is doing.
Değerli konuklar,
distinguished guests, President of the Republic of Turkey, Mr. Recep Tayyip Erdogan, is now joining us on stage. The floor is yours, sir.
Sayın Cumhurbaşkanım, ilk olarak
Distinguished President, I would first of all like to express our gratitude on behalf of TRT World, on behalf of our colleagues. It's an honor to have you, sir. Thank you. We have representatives of think tanks, we have former presidents and prime ministers, we have academics and faculty from great universities have been together with us to discuss ways and means of envisioning peace and security in a fragmented world. This very theme was the main theme of our forum. Many attendees have participated in open forum as well as closed sessions, and during these sessions we discussed what remedy may be brought to the issues and challenges of our times. As we were to decide on the main theme, we actually set forth on this journey as we considered the centennial anniversary of the end of World War I. So the naive people of those times thought that there would never again be another world war. However, this was followed by the Second World War and then massacres and all those challenges encountered in different parts of the world, things that are encountered in Rwanda, things that are encountered in different parts of the world, clearly show that lessons have not been learned from World War I. We have actually started on our path in light of the questions that are answered by our panelists. So with your permission, I'd like to ask you the first question. A world, a new world between order and chaos. What has been encountered after the First World War, and why has the humanity not been able to draw lessons? Can we think of this as a repetition of history? Is it because there is hardly any unity of humanity, that human beings go through the same vicious circle a number of times during the same century? First of all, as the saying goes, history is repeated number of times. If people had drawn lessons, history would never repeat itself. However, it is because of the reason that people do not draw lessons, history repeats itself. In order to overcome this hurdle, many efforts have been spent. We cannot ignore that. However, what happened? We have seen that the Second World War took place. And in the meantime, new formations have emerged, and these formations and organizations were thought to be a way to establish peace. For instance, United Nations is an output of that. However, as there was this search for peace and stability, however, although United Nations was established to seek peace and harmony, at this point in time we see that unfortunately UN still is unable to find an answer to this issue. In different parts of the world, we see efforts spent by the UN. UN Security Council has many resolutions. However, as far as we can see, these resolutions do not bring along an outcome. We see what happened in Afghanistan, it's obvious. And in the southern part of Turkey, we know how it is in Sudan and in Yemen, in Arakan and Yemen. So against all these, for the time being, we know that United Nations is unable to do something to put this all aside. Since from 1974, the Cyprus issue has still not been resolved. There have been many attempts, but still unresolved. Especially, a very decisive step has been taken after having had the talks with the UN, and late Kofi Annan and ourselves had taken some joint steps, and we indeed had intensive deliberations and talks with Mr. Annan. We had tremendous effort spent in Geneva. However, the outcome has been just the opposite of what was discussed during the talks. And unfortunately, the southern part of Cyprus had a referendum and decided on just the contrary. And although it was promised that southern part of Cyprus would not be having accession to the EU, they have had the accession and became a member. So this is all against just and fair treatment, and this actually causes a loss of prestige from UN's side, and then it reaches a deadlock. Back then, the US president was Mr. Bush, and I heard Mr. Bush giving an order to Colin Powell, saying that you will be the one to resolve this issue. I'm giving you this duty, I'm giving you this task, and you will solve it. However, they have been unable to bring along a solution. The other presidents that came after President Bush could not solve the issue either. Many summits have taken place, many meetings have taken place. Unfortunately, what is awaited is in Turkey's hands, but this is never solved like this. We see a similar situation in other parts of the world, like in Syria, like in Afghanistan. Have they been able to resolve the issues there? No. What about Yemen? The same rule applies there. Why not? Because the justice system all around has collapsed. The Palestinian issue, the Israeli issue, are they able to resolve this issue? No. They are unable to do that. Why not? Because although there are so many resolutions taken at the UN level, and these resolutions are not practically put into effect. Why not? Because Israel does not recognize those resolutions. Israel does not abide by these resolutions, and no one says anything. Why not? Because there are 5 permanent members at the Security Council, and only one member of the Security Council says no, and it's done. So regarding Israel, do you think that USA will say yes to a resolution if it's against the will of Israel? No, that is not possible. So what happens in the end? In the end, it is again in their favor. What has to be done, or what had to be done? The time is over. It's by and gone for the 5 permanent members of the Security Council. That was back in the post-war era after the Second World War. We know that it is the time to go for a new change. It is time for a transformation. So at the UN level, we have 193 members, and all these members, 193 members, have to have a new structure at the UN level, and they have to be able to become members at the Security Council for a term. Otherwise, it's impossible to establish peace and justice in the world if we only rely on these 5 permanent members. This is the reason why I say the world is bigger than 5. Especially as we consider one and only, the whole world is bigger than one. However, unfortunately, this is not the current practice. This is not what we see as the current practice. But UN Security Council. Does the UN Security Council represent the world? No. The countries that are represented on the Security Council, do you think all continents are represented? No, that's not the case. We say that all continents have to be represented at the UN Security Council. That's what we say. We say that Asia should be represented, Africa should be represented, and so should Europe be. And let's go even further on. We have 7 continents, and all 7 continents should be represented at the UN Security Council level. This is something we have to achieve. Who will achieve that? The political leaders of the world will achieve this. But will this be favored by the 5 permanent members of the Security Council? Well, it may be the case or it may not be the case. So this should be brought up to the agenda of the General Assembly, UN General Assembly. We have to establish this on the minds of the people of the world. We have to work on the perceptions and we have to take steps accordingly, because the world, today's world, is no longer the world of the 20th century, post-war First World War and post-Second World War. You have just arrived from the UN General Assembly. It was the 73rd time that they convened at the General Assembly, and there you made a speech and underlined the importance of this, and said that the pulse is not beating there, the heart is not beating there, and there should be something to be done. So what kind of actions Turkey may take? I'd like to ask you that, because one of the outcomes of the main sessions was that there is lack of justice, and something that the speakers emphasized is that Turkey is capable of ensuring this justice with her historical heritage, and may extend that to the rest of the world on a global scale. Do you think that Turkey may achieve that without going into the rhetoric, without isolating any institution or any other state or country? Do you think this is possible? Well, of course, Turkey is capable of attracting the global powers without tackling too much on the global powers. We know that global powers have to be recognized, and the countries of the world who are aware of this, that have this awareness, are positive about Turkey's point. Whenever we come together and have bilateral talks, whenever we come together at symposia and at panel discussions, they all confirm our point. They do make the confirmation, but how are we going to take action? To take action, we will work. We will strive hard. Of course, this takes a lot of time. This takes a lot of effort and diligent work. As we take all these steps all around the world, we have to look and see where we can take this at the level of these 5 permanent members. There are some temporary members, but do they count in the presence of those 5 members? No, they just raise their hands and they vote, and that's about it. And to be elected as temporary members, countries strive so hard. Well, it doesn't really matter if you're a temporary member at the Security Council. It does not really make a difference. You just have the title of a temporary member at the Security Council, and that's it. Distinguished President, I now would like to refer to what I've just said, and then will ask you a question. Our speakers and panelists said that Turkey may become even more active and even more effective based on the historical heritage. There has been a diplomatic victory a few weeks ago, the Idlib agreement. If this was not achieved, then more and more refugees could have entered through our borders, and then there would be further turmoil. However, at the Astana process and at Sochi, you really spend a tremendous effort. Do you think that this may be a new beginning?
Jimmy Sora, my esteemed friend involved in this, again from Lebanon, previous Prime Minister, my dear colleague, is also here. And they're involved in all of the topics. But I need to say the following. Idlib, as you know, had become an exile for those fleeing from Aleppo. They came to Idlib, and suddenly Idlib started hosting 3.5 million people in the city and in the rural areas. Okay, Idlib. It is a neighbor of Turkey, at the border of Turkey, and those barrel bombs and all conventional high-dose weapons, once they started bombarding, where would they have fled? They would have fled to Turkey, and that's what was going to happen, especially in Samandağ, Yaylada. From Hatay, they would have entered into Turkey. Of course, we took many precautions because we could not turn these people over to the bombardment. Just like 3.5 million Syrians are currently on our soil. Even if there are newcomers, here again we would not have been able to close our borders like others have done. Why? Because first of all, these are human beings we're facing. Are we going to watch them die? This is no humanitarian issue. This is a humanitarian issue. And we took our precautions, but in the meantime, as you know, we held 3 important summits: Sochi, Ankara, Tehran summits. And before those, we had the Astana process that has gotten underway. Together with Astana process, these summits continue to take place, but above and beyond everything, it became clear that we had to take certain precautions, and as Russia, Turkey, Iran, we started working on this. In the first Sochi summit, and then in Ankara and Tehran, on those summits, we did really good work. And after this work, of course, the regime bombarding Idlib in Syria, and a very frustrating atmosphere taking hold in Idlib caused us to act very quickly. We talked to Mr. Putin, and following that, we were invited to Sochi, and at Sochi, we had like a finale summit with Mr. Putin, and this finale was for Idlib. And there, we had a 10-item memorandum of understanding. Our defense ministers signed this MOU in front of us, and this MOU between us, with the signatures that have been performed, took hold as of that evening. And while that was happening, the decisiveness, determination of Mr. Putin and myself, the work done by our delegation, have facilitated all this for us. Because Mr. Putin, they said, first of all, we're going to prevent the regime from going into this region, but radical extremism in the center of Idlib, we should not have things that happened in other places happen there. And they wanted a guarantee for that. And we said, let's do this together. You know, around Idlib, we had 12 points of observation. And behind those, Russia has 10 points of observation, and behind those, 6 points of observation by Iran. However, here, 15-kilometer and 20-kilometer corridor is of utmost importance, because keeping this corridor safe means keeping Idlib safe. And those points of observation, we started reinforcing those day by day. And as those points got reinforced, of course, self-confidence took hold in the people of Idlib. But these radical groups, after these steps have been taken, they together with our teams who are now talking to them, up until now, we have not experienced any problems. Our wish is such that we will be able to sustain this situation, the status quo, which we're trying to do. And above and beyond all of these, of course, in the interviews that we have held with Russia, there's one more step we have achieved, which is Idlib is, of course, in ruins. Maybe 70,000, 80,000 people have gone back. And that was the target. People have started to go back to Idlib. At El-Bab and Afrin, on those regions as well, there's this going back around 250,000 people. All of this going back is really the fruit of all our efforts. This is now coming to fruition, all of our efforts. Even though the figure is 3.5 million, 4 million, the start of this going back is a very positive development. Of course, we have taken some precautions. We have made some steps above and beyond this as well. As you know, this 3.5 million refugees that came into Turkey are no longer in camps. For instance, tent camps, you cannot live there. We are now eliminating those little by little, and we are turning those into container towns. This is what we're doing right now. But when you look at the West, when you look at the world, the situation there is unfortunately very different. However, we won't be able to behave like them, we said, and we're doing our best at that point as well. However, in Idlib as well, really, and Mr. Putin has had a most positive approach to all this, and in the same manner, Iran's positive approach about our latest decision about Idlib, saying that they will not be involved in any operation for Idlib. They have promised this to us, and so we have taken those steps based on that. And I think in the coming days, France and Germany will be joining a summit. Russia, France, Germany, Turkey, we're going to have an Istanbul summit, maybe towards the end of the month or the beginning of November. I hope that hopefully from this summit of 4 countries, we will have a positive result. As you know, we now have this small group. And with a small group, of course, what can be done, what can be achieved, I don't know. Because inside the small group, Turkey is not there. Inside the small group, Syria isn't there. Russia isn't there. Well, who is there? USA. Saudi Arabia. France, Germany, Jordan. There are 7 countries, but not the major players. Now, we have a border of 911 kilometers and 115 on the west, and, there's no Turkey there. I mean, explaining this is a bit challenging. Okay, Mr. President. One of the sessions was inspiring global conscience in times of crisis, and steps that Turkey has taken about Idlib are inspiring for the conscience of the globe. Apart from our forum yesterday, there was another activity that we held, an awards ceremony, and we gave awards to people with a global conscience. There was a Somalian activist among them, Ms. Hava. In Somalia, they gave a chance for life to thousands of people and supported development in Somalia, the daughter could be with us. During the speech, it was a wonderful speech. It impacted everyone in the hall. The sentence uttered was, the president of Turkey, after he visited Somalia, the way that other countries of the world viewed us changed, and after that, Somalia started to receive more aid. In fact, Turkey's such activities is not only for its own geopolitics, but globally it is enlarging the Turkish Red Crescent Tika with other activities as well. Turkey is trying to reach all four corners of the world. Of course, the first time we went, it was together with my spouse. Of course, back then, no country in the world had visited Somalia before. International organizations had not been there. We went there with our NGOs like Red Crescent, like AFAC. We went there together, and it was a meaningful visit in that we said, we don't have an embassy here. We should establish one. And they gave us they offered us 85 hectares of land, the administration of Somalia, 85,000 square meters. Right now, our largest embassy in the world is in Somalia. But the strongest countries in the world, don't have an embassy building there. Do you know that? They have containers at the airport. That's the embassy buildings. They have containers at the airport. USA, UK, they have not really constructed an embassy building for themselves so far, but we have. And currently, we are training the Somalian army there. Why? Otherwise, the administration of Somalia will be made a victim of terror. They have terror groups there. We keep saying ISIS, okay? Is the Shabi, is there ISIS? So how are we going to support them? We have supported them. Our Red Crescent is ever present. AFAD is ever present there. We have constructed hospitals, schools. In our hospitals and schools, we're always there. Why? Because we have to extend our hand. And Al-Shabaab, last year, again, when the forum was organized, the Somalian president was going to be here, but they had made an attack, and the president could not come to our forum. Al-Shabaab, of course, their character there is different. Over here, these organizations are even indirectly penetrating the parliaments of that region. In order to overcome these, the administrations there need to be reinforced. And for them to find strength and power, the world should have diplomatic representations in that country. After a while, in Afghanistan as well, only after a certain period such embassies have been inaugurated. But from then until now, the bombardment has been going on in Afghanistan. Terrorist organizations are still, continuing what they're doing there. But you have to reinforce the administrations there so that they could fight against terror more easily. Otherwise, it's no easy task, because in struggling against terror, we are quite skillful. We have 7 martyrs today. 7 soldiers of ours have become martyrs only today, but are we going to stop? No, we're not going to stop. They're going to take 700 martyrs from us. We're going to kill 700 terrorists from their side. There's absolutely no stopping. We are going to make the terrorists pay for what they have done, and we are determined in that regard. And these people, of course, will see our experience and continue their struggle accordingly. Mr. President, while we're talking about terror, let's continue from there. In your UN speech, you said big states are supporting terror. USA, you said in your speech, especially in Syria, who is supporting terrorist organizations in Syria. The whole world knows this very clearly. And you said one day that terror will come and hit you. When you formed the sentence, what I remember it was when Soviet Union occupied Afghanistan, again, terrorist organizations had been supported, and then they became the architects of September 11 in the States. Is it again history repeating itself? Is that what you were reminding? Were you alluding to that? USA and other countries will suffer from this by, again, supporting terror. You know, if you don't draw lessons, history repeats itself. Now, in Syria, 19,000 trailers of weapons, ammunition, equipment have been brought for the terrorist organizations there. By whom? By the states. 3,000 cargo planes brought weaponry, ammunition, equipment, device. Currently, in the north of Syria, there are 22 bases belonging to the U.S., and these are being reinforced with what? You know, with all this weaponry, ammunition, devices, and equipment that have been brought in.
And we know that there are 5 more bases belonging to Russia. So why are these bases located here? Why do we see these bases here? On the one hand, we see that people talk about the integrity of Syrian soil, and then on the other hand, you will establish 22 bases. And then again, who will be sharing the oil there? You will be making calculations. And on the other hand, Syria is suffering from poverty, and you will refer to this poverty, and then you will turn to us and tell us to leave this piece of land. No, we are not going to leave that part of land until the people of Syria will have their elections, and once the elections are over, we will hand the country over to the owners of the country and leave. But we are not going to well, we don't see U.S. being invited by the state, but U.S. is there. Russia was invited by Syria. But what we are saying is that once there is peace and stability established there, once peace prevails there, we will leave. That was the case in Afrin. That was the case in Idlib. We were invited, and that is why we were there. So we do our best to go and help wherever and whenever there are people in need. I'd like to ask you one more question regarding terror, especially when it comes to terrorism supported by states. Do you think it's possible to establish an international mechanism? Well, of course, it is very much possible. I wouldn't say it is not possible, but you know which is the most important mechanism for this? The UN, United Nations. The same thing. So UN Security Council will have to take some steps, will have to make some resolutions, then it will be possible. In various parts of the world, when we think about various points, Somalia and Kosovo, as you know, Turkey was granted some tasks and missions, and we went there and we fulfilled our mission. So against the ones who caused this winds of terrorism supported by states, steps may very well be taken. And if you ask me, the relevant authority is the UN and the Security Council. For instance, when it comes to Jerusalem, as an example, a step was taken. Who took that step? UN did. We made our application, and as a result of that, United Nations had the voting, and as a result of that, regarding Jerusalem, the decision was made in the direction that we desire. But Then again, there may be people who were not in favor of this decision. There were some. So 7 countries joined United States. However, 127 countries supported our suggestion, our proposal, and that's how the decision was made. And then US decided to move its embassy to Jerusalem. Well, they may do so. We won't be harmed because of that. But humanity knows this. And humanity makes note of this. And humanity records this because that is the capital of 3 religions. And 3 religions have a say and have a share there. So when you take a look at the basis, the Muslims and the Christians have a specific infrastructure. I have been working on the underground features of Jerusalem since from my term at the Metropolitan Municipality. I've been interested in the infrastructure of the city, and we had even prepared booklets and sent them those booklets. However, there is actually a siege there. So the integrity of Palestinian soil, how was that in the past and how is it now in the year 2018? Take a look at the integrity of Palestine and integrity of Israeli soil. Back in 1948, it was just the contrary. So Palestine of 1948 no longer exists, and Israel of 1948 is no longer in existence. It has just gone the other extreme. Palestine has become extremely small, and Israel, on the contrary, grew immensely. So in a world with an understanding of justice should resolve this issue. This is the reason why I say that United Nations require serious reforms. That you also pointed out during your speech at the UN General Assembly. You referred to the Palestinian issue, and I'm quoting from you, "We will always continue to stand behind Palestinian people and Palestine." Distinguished Minister, distinguished President, you have referred to these issues, and we also had European Union referred to during our panel discussions. We were in search of the answer to the question, will the EU come to an end? Well, some think that EU's end is near. So you made a referendum, you're saying. Did you conduct a survey? No, it's our experts and our speakers and panelists actually reached that conclusion. There is Brexit on the one hand, and there are some developments in other European countries, and some claim that we're coming close to an end to the EU. Do you agree? I also see signs of that. Well, I think if it's drawing to a close, it should come as soon as possible so that we draw our direction. Because just imagine, since from 1963, all through these years, they have been actually keeping us busy, and this is indeed torture. Countries that you would not be able to compare with Turkey have long become members to the EU. Copenhagen criteria. Turkey has undertaken steps in order to fulfill Copenhagen criteria from A to Z. Countries that are not close to these criteria have already become members to the EU. Take a look at the situation of Turkey. They always have superficial excuses not to let Turkey have full membership. I am the most experienced and senior Prime Minister and President among you all, I say to the leaders of the EU. I have been in this process, and none of you were here then. I used to attend the summits, EU summits. Back then, the French President Chirac and Schröder was the German Chancellor. We used to sit down and discuss, and we were also present at the Leaders Summit. I'm going to give some names. I'm sorry to do that, but I will. Sarkozy then became the French president, and German Chancellor Merkel. Merkel became the chancellor. So once they came to the government, once they became the new president and the chancellor respectively, they abolished this summit or this platform. Only one chapter was opened, no other chapters were gone into, and then they made a series of changes and said that opening and closing of these chapters will not be performed any longer. So what will be done instead? There will only be an opening and leaders will not attend, they said. So what are we discussing? What are we negotiating? What are we going to negotiate? Who will do that? So since that day until now, related to Turkey, there is no single sign that shows Turkey has an open path ahead of her. They just give us recommendations. They just preach. They say, okay, let's have a different practice for you. Let's have a special condition for Turkey. We do not accept that. During my most recent trip in the US, I said this to a couple of European leaders. You're tiring me and I'm tiring you. If you're going to let Turkey in, just let us know. If you're not going to let Turkey in, just let us know so that you go your way and we go our way. So let's not continue tiring one another. Unfortunately, they are not tired of tiring us. So I also said this to Chancellor Merkel. Just let us know. Just be frank. If you're not going to let us in, if you're not going to let Turkey become a member, then we'll go our way. They're unable to say that either. So let me ask you this. Let's do it from the other way around. Does Turkey have any proposals to ensure EU integration? Well, of course, why not? Turkey is not created to disintegrate the EU. The more powerful the EU is, the more powerful Turkey will be. But we believe that Turkey will contribute immensely to the EU, and EU will contribute immensely to Turkey. But if this goes in this direction, this is going to be a great headline for tomorrow's newspaper. If this goes in this direction, then we'll ask it to 81 million people of this country, and then we'll see what we will do. So you got the heading, Fatih. That's going to be tomorrow's heading. So another referendum in Turkey is up and coming, will be the heading for tomorrow. Okay, Mr. President. European Union has not been formed with the abolishment of the borders. There is also a union of norms. In other words, these are the norms that are dictated all the time, like human rights and justice according to their understanding, peace and safety and security. So in this context, especially recently, we see waves of Islamophobia and also some movements against refugees. We witness that with our own eyes. We see that in the media and also in the printed press. I also ask this in the context of terrorism. Recently, we see that Islam and terrorism are brought together. And there is Islamophobia that is on the rise both in the US and also in the EU. Do you think this is inherited from a historical rage, or is it because of today's conditions that we see this rage? Well, of course, there's a history behind it. Claiming otherwise would be a deception. I have experienced many things, but then again, it's not appropriate for me to mention those. There are some things that have been clearly put forward and told to us, but then again, you cannot talk about everything at every place. So you say one heading is enough. Yes, of course, one heading is enough for tomorrow, but I'll save the second heading for later on. Now, they are sometimes in an effort to actually corner us. They say that it's because you have a high level of population, your population is too high. Well, that's a lie, because there are some other EU countries with equal amount of people. Just be honest. That's tell the truth. They are unable to say that, but we know what it is. But this truth was once uttered by a French foreign minister, but I'm not going to tell it now. When the time comes, when it is the right time, I will disclose that, because that's something that has to be disclosed. When we have the referendum, after the referendum. So is this going to be in a short period of time? It's my journalism blood rushing in. Well, let us first discuss it among ourselves. As the president of the political party, I have to discuss this with my colleagues. And when they say it's the right time, we will take our action. As you know, there's going to be the local elections in March. All the best to that. Well, it has been more than 4 elections since we established TRT World, so there will be many more exciting days to come ahead of us. Turkey is no longer as she used to be. There are some European countries that you see that they have 2 or 3 referendums a year. We have to get used to the referendum. Well, with the new system, we will have that. The new system will bring that.
Peki Sayın Cumhurbaşkanım.
Okay, Mr. President. Again, about your speech at the UN, and in recent days it has drawn the attention of the world, and Turkey has supported in this context. Trade wars, maybe in the upcoming period, these types of wars we will be witnessing more frequently. In your UN speech, you said if all countries act in concert, this chaos could be prevented. You said, how can that be? Simple. Currently, imagine iron and steel. This iron and steel issue came up. The prices about iron and steel, some steps have been taken. Of course, in iron and steel, the US is a monopoly, and because of that, they're exercising their power on the rest of the world, and they went for taxation significantly. Even China couldn't withstand this, and China took counter precautions. Russia took its own precautions, and we said we're going to purchase S-400 from Russia. The US said, I don't find that to be the right thing to do. Why not? Because you are a NATO member. A NATO member cannot go and purchase S-400 from a non-NATO country, they said. Now, it's such a strange approach. Okay, then, when you tell me you can't buy S-400 from Russia, well, Greece has purchased S-300 from Russia. Why didn't you tell the same thing to Greece? No prohibition for Greece, but we are prohibited from doing this. I said, I'm sorry. Thankfully, NATO Secretary General made an announcement. He said, Turkey, as a partner of ours, is free in its preferences, he said, and right now, because of the conditions and for the defense of our country, we have taken that step. Okay. Didn't you ask for this from the U.S.? Well, we asked for a lot of things to our defense industry from the U.S., but unfortunately, U.S. gave the following response to the majority of our requests. The Congress does not allow it. That's the answer. The Congress doesn't allow it. Okay, well, it doesn't allow us, but PYDYPJ, are they allowing them? 19,000 weaponry, ammunition, equipment, device you send to a terrorist organization, you don't sell to me. And you're giving it to them free of charge. Now, can that happen? Now, these bring on the economic war then. Okay, he says, well, I'm strong, and since I'm strong, I'm right. And we're saying that's not our philosophy. The side which is right is strong, we say. So, therefore, within this process, we're not going to give up on this economic warfare. We're going to be struggling as a nation. I have tremendous faith in my nation. This nation has suffered from famine, from thirst, but they have never given up on their independence. And, you know, we're nowhere near there. Even though Kılıçdaroğlu says Turkey is going to go hungry next year, we can share a loaf of bread with him if he comes to ask. And Turkey was not left alone vis-à-vis US's economic attack from the EU and other countries. Turkey has found support. And the global system, of course, makes economic warfare even more destructive. In our relations with those countries that you just mentioned, be it China, be it Russia, and Germany, France, our relations with those countries, with the UK. Currently, we are enjoying good relations with them, and increasingly so. And the relevant ministers have visited the entire region, with Qatar leading the way. We are continuing with these. In the same way, again, we are meeting many countries in the region. These are ongoing. At a further point, our steps about the defense industry, these are making some people uncomfortable. The steps that we have taken for nuclear energy, one of which is the nuclear energy that we have with Russia at the moment. Another one, hopefully, with China, we're going to be taking a step. And the meetings are underway with Japan. We're going to be deciding until the end of the year. Of course, these are investments with great potential for the relevant infrastructure in nuclear. For years and years, we could not purchase autonomous aircraft from the US. But, you know, we have a saying, when you have a bad neighbor, you end up buying your own house. And our own entrepreneurs built drones, and in Jarablus and in Afrin as well, and internally as well. These drones with weapons are gaining a lot of ground in struggling against terrorism, so we're no longer dependent on them. Hopefully, from now on, even a stronger version is on the way. Steps have been taken. About what? The result will be good. In drones, aircraft drones with weapon, hopefully we'll have production of a much larger tonnage, because you saw these in Technofest. Yes, that's what I was going to say. And high school students, the Turkish youth, these are all signs of something. So, the signs are on the way, the rest will follow. It will be better. Technofest, last week, hundreds of young people with lots of inventions. This is a source of pride and happiness for us. In your UN speech, you said that the UN needs a youth council, which should be headquartered in Istanbul. Why? And Fatih is going faster than I am. There's no reason. We had a building for this purpose under construction. If the UN, and my dear friend is here, if the UN adopts this decision, if we could headquarter the youth committee of the UN, we will allocate this building in Istanbul to them. We will establish the youth council, and it will introduce the perspective of youth. I think this formation would take very, very auspicious steps to that end, because my past in politics comes from the youth councils, and I'm aware of the potential of the youth at that point. And as far as taking advantage of that perspective, we will allocate a facility to them, a nice UN Youth Council in Istanbul, hopefully. And of course, we have to establish one for women as well. We need to do that as well. Mr. President, we will conclude with the following promise. Human safety should take priority over national security. This is what a participant said. When we can ensure that, then can we make an effort to change things around the world. Today, Turkey is bringing that into the foreground in Syria. Human security is even more important than national security when that is the case. One of the biggest discussions in Syria was on chemical weaponry, and until now, more than 500,000 people have lost their lives. They have been massacred with conventional weapons, but when it's a question of chemical weaponry, the biggest states will intervene, they said. Is it because of their own national security always bringing forward the chemical weaponry? Unfortunately, there's this acrobatics going on here. First, we should accept the following. This is a decision by 1915. They said chemical weapons were recorded as a crime, and since then, chemical weapons have become a tool for crime all around the world. And I'm saying, if it's causing the death of a human being, or if it is causing the death of people en masses, then no matter what tool it is, what instrument it is an instrument of crime. As you have just expressed, with chemical weapons, let's say in Syria, 300, 500, 1,000, 1,500, 2,000, 5,000 people, let's say, are there. Okay. How many people have been killed by conventional weapons? Let's elaborate on that. Almost 1 million people have been murdered with conventional weapons in Syria. Now, they're not talking about conventional weapons at all. They keep saying chemical weapons. And do you know what this means? Right now, I close the door. Do whatever you wish. With what? With conventional weapons. And what are they hitting with? They're hitting with conventional weapons. Do not fool the world. And in UN and everywhere, we're putting this on the agenda, but still everyone is talking chemical weapons. And I'm saying, do not fool us with chemical weapons. People are being murdered by conventional weapons. So long as it's a human being that is being murdered, whatever it is that is killing that human being, I'm against it. That's that simple. Mr. President, thank you very much. For 2 days, as I said in the beginning, previous heads of state previous heads of state, think tank representatives, and many academicians from universities have been with us. And we have drawn a lesson as well. I think we're going to have the next program in a much larger hall because many students wanted to participate from universities, but this year it was kind of limited. Hopefully next year our vision department will hire a larger hall, and we'll be hosting you there once again, and we'll continue to organize these fora. Our desire is for TRT World Forum to become one of the strong forums around the world, and I think that we have succeeded in this with our guests this year. We will continue in the coming years. You have honored us with your presence here. I would like to thank all guests for the wealth they have contributed on behalf of my own person, my country, and my nation. As Mr. Fatih has expressed, next year we'll be in a larger hall because we have much larger halls in Istanbul, not with 300, 500 people. 1,000, 1,500, 2,000 people should be present. Okay, we have received the message, sir. It's Istanbul. You know, that's what suits Istanbul. Okay, we received the message. Okay, thank you very much.